Hi everyone, and welcome back to this new video. Last year, as some of you may know, I made the wedding dress from The Sound of Music, and it's been one of the most popular videos that I've posted here on YouTube. So I've decided in this video to recreate another iconic movie wedding dress. As you saw from the introduction, it will be the wedding dress worn by Audrey Hepburn in the film Funny Face, and this was designed by Hubert de Givenchy. I'd like to thank Henry Wilkenson for helping me so much with the research into this project. I couldn't have done it without him and his knowledge of both Audrey and Givenchy. And he has a really wonderful YouTube channel, so I will link down to that below, so please go and have a look and follow him too. Funny Face was released in 1957 and tells the story of a girl working in a New York Greenwich bookshop discovered and turned into a fashion model. So a lot of the sequence of the film is filmed in Paris, doing these wonderful location shots with her wearing this amazing wardrobe by Givenchy, and the photos were produced by one of the top fashion photographers at that time, Richard Avedon. Most of the clothes that Audrey wears were from actual Givenchy collections of the time when she was wearing the clothes in the films. And when the V&A had an exhibition maybe 10-15 years ago about Parisian and London couture, they actually had the blue cape that she wears in this film on display. I hope you enjoy this video. Please remember, if you enjoy these videos and would like to support me, you can either click on the Thanks tab below the screen or subscribe to my Patreon, which I will link in the description below. So now, let's get in to start creating this Givenchy dress. I'm starting by cutting out the understructure to the dress, which for this is a corset. The Paris fashion houses had their own way of doing these. At Dior, they're made out of a cotton bobbin net. At Givenchy, he used a taffeta. I found this fabric in my stock. It's actually a frill that came off one of the Hollywood dresses that I own. Took it off when I was doing the restoration work onto it, and I held on to it because I knew it would come in useful for something, and now it has. For this corset, there are actually 32 individually cut pieces that go into this, because there's 16 panels in the whole corset, but it's double layered, so there's 32 pieces in all. Once all the pieces are cut, I then flat tack them together to hold all the layers in place. Bodice and hip sections are sewn separately. These then have their seam allowances oversewn by hand as per original Givenchy dresses. Once this is all done, then the bodice and hip parts are sewn together at the waist seam. The next step is then to attach all the boning channels to the corset, and then sew in a lapped zip. Here you can see me applying to the end of a zip a pocketed lead weight. This is to hold the zip in place inside the dress. I then move on to cutting out the petticoat yoke and cutting and sewing all the layers of net and organza. I then move on to sewing the silk layer of the skirt. Here you can see me starching and ironing the tulle layer. This is to help give the fabric a little bit of body, and it makes it easier for handling the fabric when sewing the pieces together. I've made a toile of the bodice to see how the shape has worked out. I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out. One thing I might do though is just have a look at where this seam is sitting, and I might just bring it up ever so slightly after looking at photographs of the dress and the scene in the film. After making up the toile of the bodice, I was still having doubts about the cut of it and the seam placing, so I was very lucky enough to be able to speak to someone who actually worked for Givenchy and Yves Saint Laurent for over 30 years. And I discussed this particular dress with him, and also the other dresses that I was looking at of Givenchy's that were made around the same time that I was using as a guide for cutting and seam placement. And talking it through with him and going through the images with him, he suggested that it would be cut, the midsection would be cut with seams coming down from bust point to through the waist to the hips. So I am now going to recut the pattern following what I've discovered through my discussion, and then start cutting out the fabrics and making up the bodice. The bodice is made from 3 layers of fabric, a base layer in silk organza, then the silk layer, and finally the spotted tulle layer. The tulle layer is sewn together separately from the silk layer. It is then laid on top, and all the layers are sewn together at the under bust seam. After the bodice is sewn up, I then move on to cutting out the armhole facings. This is then sewn onto the armhole and the edge herringbone down. pleat is then formed in the shoulder. I then move on to cutting the neckline facing and applying it to the bodice using the same method as the armhole. At the neckline I sew on the pearl buttons used for attaching the hood. The hood is cut from a circle of fabric and a layer of fine tulle. It is then folded in half and gathered around the long edge. I cut a piece of bias from the silk and then sew this onto the hood and tails. And finally, here she is finished. This has been a lot of work, more than I'm used to doing. It's probably taken a few months to actually produce her. It's been a lot of research, a lot of working out. And for such a simple dress, there are actually 70 pieces of individually cut pieces of fabric in her. I think she's turned out really well. I can't actually stop looking at her. I love the shape. It's given me a greater appreciation of the work of Givenchy and the clothes that he produced for Audrey. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please remember to like and subscribe and click the little bell icon to receive a notification whenever I post a new video. And I hope to see you all again very soon.